Just we're gonna wait for a few seconds. I see a lot of people just entering. Good afternoon, everyone, and good morning to all of you joining us from the West Coast. My name is Étienne Lamy, and I will be your master of ceremony for the next hours. Before getting to the heart of the subject, allow me to recall an important event that took place in 2020. Last September, my colleague Thomas Tines and I became majority shareholder of the Groupe Investissement Responsable. With guidance from Olivier, former CEO of GIR, who remained shareholder and chairman of the board, and in collaboration with Share, we launched the GIR 2.0. The new version of the GIR aims to be the leading player in the Canadian voting right management industry. Now with clients from coast to coast, the new corporation can no longer be ignored by any organization of any size. Considered a major transaction by several industry actors, this demonstrates an important turning point in the management of proxy voting in Canada. Indeed, GIR 2.0 is now a key player for all Canadian institutional investors, regardless of their size. The voting right management industry is no longer a marginal responsible investment activity, but a well-functioning business, as the next speaker will demonstrate. In the coming year, you will be able to witness the deployment of a wider range of services. We can't wait to tell you about all the projects we are working on. Nonetheless, today, the goal is to look back on the 2020 season for Canadian perspective. You will attend several presentations, which I hope you will enjoy. Finally, here are some technical details about the webinar. A question period will take place at the end of the session. You can ask your question via instant messaging at any time. I will read them and direct them to the right person during the Q&A period. I will invite all of you to mute your microphone. Without further ado, I wish you a good webinar. I pass the virtual microphone to Shannon Rohan from Share.
Great, thank you, Étienne, and good morning, good afternoon, everyone. I'm joining the webinar today from the West Coast, Vancouver, on the traditional and unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. So we at Share are really, really pleased and excited to support the new GIR and its launch of what is now, as Étienne said, the only Canadian-owned proxy voting service. The excellent work that GIR has done in the past and will continue to do now is really of great benefit to the responsible investment movement in Canada. And I'm glad and as I said, excited that Share and GIR are now making this journey together. As you know, and as you're going to hear today, proxy voting is a critical tool in the responsible investment toolbox. It can have dramatic effects on corporate governance and on the environmental and social effects of corporations. It can also support effective shareholder engagement, and it can hold corporate boards and management to account. But really, it can only do that if the vote is exercised continuously, if it's exercised effectively, thoughtfully, and strategically. And together, GIR and Share will be pushing the envelope on what can be done with proxy voting to do all of that. So today's speakers will take you through the best and worst of the most recent proxy voting season, as well as the key trends in responsible investment that you need to know. We're going to start with Rosalie Van Vet. Rosalie is passionate about sustainable finance, a field in which she has been working for nearly 20 years. Some of you might know her from when she was working at GIR. She actually started her career here, or from the 10 years she was a spokesperson for the Desjardins Group. Rosalie is now an independent consultant, working with various market leaders such as financial advisors and investment management firms. She offers them invaluable assistance in the planning and deployment of their strategies for effective consideration of environmental, social, and governance factors. She takes pleasure in sharing her knowledge with the many students at the university where she teaches on the basics of sustainable investment and responsible investment. So we're lucky to have Rosalie here with us today. Thank you. She'll be followed by my colleague, Sarah Couturier-Panot, a senior engagement analyst at Share, who will review the vote results at Canadian companies this year and what they tell us about the importance of the vote for Canadian shareholders. Sarah specializes in decent work and human rights engagements, as well as corporate lobbying and supply chain due diligence. Before joining Share in 2019, Sarah researched transparency in the extractive industry and climate change related disclosure at the Goldcorp Research and Innovation Chair in Natural Resources and Energy Law. We'll also be hearing from Lisa Lindsay, who will fill us in on a new study by Majority Action in the US that assessed the voting practices of several of the large asset managers on climate change votes. Lisa directs investor engagement at Majority Action, and she leads outreach with institutional investors to support their efforts to implement good governance practices and sustainable business strategies. Previously, Lisa was the Capital Strategies Director at AFSCME, where she led the effort to remove Jamie Dimon as the board chair of JP Morgan Chase. She helped pass the Dodd-Frank Act and pioneered shareholder initiatives around ALEC and human rights. So it's great also to have you here with us today, Lisa. And lastly, Thomas Estines, one of the new co-CEOs at GIR, will walk us through some of the new regulatory challenges that we face as responsible investors and the move to overcome them. Thomas has been co-CEO of GIR since 2020. He joined the company in 2013, where he successfully held the positions of corporate governance analyst, chief analyst, and director of operations. So again, thank you all for joining us here today. And without any further delay, I want to pass it over to Rosalie.
Thank you, Shannon. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here with you. I'm, online based in Montreal, and I wanted to touch on 3 topics. The first one is pandemic, the COVID, of course. Many of us are affected or impacted by COVID, and there are lots of things that we could say. The connection between COVID and biodiversities, zoonoses, and things like that. But I'd like to focus on AGM. We're talking about voting, and we're talking about what impacts investors. As you know, the pandemic started when it was just about to be the AGM season, where the bulk of all the meetings are taking place in April and May. So it turned out that a huge number of those meetings were reported or were rescheduled or had to be conducted online. In fact, 3,900 of those meetings were held online. And I was I was talking with Americans last week, and they witnessed some enthusiasm on the part of companies who were happy to be able to control much better the voices, the space that was left for shareholder. But, on the other end, witnessing also the criticism arising from investors about this sometimes lack of space to be able to express ourselves. And so I think we need to pay attention for next year. It's still unsure whether or not we're going to be able to have in-person AGM. So I think we have to see how those meetings are going to be structured if they are online, and also we have to be aware of what will be going on in terms of executive compensation and the ripple effect on pay, whether or not the compensation will be changed, affected by all the business changes, the layoffs, and all of that. So look out for 2021. The second topic is also an unavoidable topic. It is climate change, and we'll be talking more about that later on. I think climate change probably is amongst all the ESG topic is the one that mobilizes the most energy from investors and also issuers, companies. A lot of time is spent trying to understand how climate change will impact businesses throughout time and as we go and move hopefully to low carbon economies. It is prompting lots of work to calculate and also lots of work to disclose. And one of the big elements that is helping on that front is the subcommittee of the Financial Stability Board called TCFD, the Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosure, and their recommendations to the G20 issued in 2017. It forces, or suggests rather, I should say, companies and also investors and lenders to forecast and do a lot of scenario planning and scenario analysis on how their business or their portfolio will evolve over time, depending on different hypotheses of climate warming to 3 degrees, 4 degrees, and 6 degrees. Another important element, I think, that makes people work is the Climate Action 100 Plus, something that you're very familiar with, shareholder engagement. There's a group of investors, a fairly large group, that is targeting or has been targeting the top greenhouse gas emitter in the world, and asking them for more information or asking them for measures, concrete measures on how they are going to conduct their transition. But the concept of transition implies a beginning and an end. And so it's not clear exactly what the end game should be, but there is a growing consensus over the fact that it probably should be net zero in the year 2050. So in essence, we have 30 years to transition to net zero. And this, you see companies announcing this as a result of pressures from many stakeholders, some of them being shareholders, part of the Climate Action 100 group. But it is also a topic for some investors who are endorsing a similar pathway to net zero in 2050, and there's even an alliance on that. So climate change is also a topic for shareholder proposals, and we'll touch on that later. I wanted to finish off with the third subject, which is standardization and how the industry of sustainable finance structured itself. Let's say in the last 30, 20 years, we saw sustainability emerged in finance, but now I think we can claim that it's mainstream or, becoming mainstream. In the next 5 to 10 to 15 years, what we'll see is an era of standardization. There is a multiplication of voluntary framework for disclosure on environmental, social, and governance information. Investors are asking companies and other stakeholders are asking companies. So there is a growing consensus that we need common framework and we need to work with common bases. And so there are right now conversations between the Global Reporting Initiative and SASB, Sustainable Accounting Sustainability Board 2 framework. And actually the conversation has also expanded to the International Accounting Association, calling for these framework to be merged also. Lastly, when we talk about transition, we also see efforts in structuring, standardizing transition in green. The Europeans are certainly leading the way with the green taxonomy that has been published in the last few months. And the Canadians are also talking about a transition taxonomy, how we can finance the transition. So more on that to come in the months and the years ahead of us. And so maybe back to you, Étienne, for the next speaker.
Thank you very much, Rosalie. If any of you want to read more about ESG issue, we did publish the Groupe Investissement Responsable and Rosalie publication available on our website. So you can find that on our website. Let's now hear from Sarah Couturier-Tano, who is an analyst, senior analyst at Share.
Thank you, Étienne. Hi, everybody. So you've heard already today that the range of environmental, social, and governance issues are at the forefront of proxy voting, corporate governance, and also shareholder engagement activities right now. For this presentation, I'm going to review this year's vote results in Canada and what it says about how we exercise our votes as shareholders. What may surprise you is that despite the discussion around environmental and social responsibility between investors and companies in Canada, there is not a big increase in the number of shareholder proposals being filed at Canadian companies. In fact, 98.6% of what is being voted on at corporate annual meetings in Canada is still being put on the ballot by management, and only 1.4% of the votes are over shareholder proposals. What management puts on the ballot in general relates to directors for election, selection of the auditors, and in many cases, an advisory vote on executive compensation. So usually, as you may know, there is a strong support for all three of those items. It means large majority votes for directors, for auditors, and large majorities for the board's approach to executive compensation, what we call a say on pay vote. So it is always interesting to see where votes are lower for any of these items. For instance, let's take a look at the say on pay vote. If you're okay with that, let's start with a quick poll. In 2020, 52 US companies failed their say on pay votes. That is, they got less than 50% support from shareholders. So the question is, out of the 223 companies in the TSX Composite Index, how many Canadian companies do you think failed their say on pay vote in 2020? Was it 0, 6, or 13? You have 10 seconds to fill out your choice. All right, let's see the result. So 45% of you said that the result was 13, 35% said 6, and 20% said 0. The answer was actually 0. No company on the TSX Composite Index actually failed its vote this year. And if we look back in 2018 and 2019, 2 companies only failed each year. So clearly, you have to have done something pretty bad to fail the vote in Canada. This year, there were 5 companies with low result, though, as seen here on the screen. And for an example of what spurred a low vote, Vermilion Energy received around 65% support for its pay approach. So Vermilion is an upstream oil and gas company that has struggled with depressed fossil fuel prices. In March, the company cut its dividend from 0.23 to $0.02 per share, and then suspended it entirely in April. So as you may imagine, often investors get a bit annoyed with high executive payouts when they have taken a hit themselves on the dividend, which gets reflected in the say on pay vote, but especially so at Vermilion, where the CEO received 2 consecutive increases to his salary base by 68% in 2019 and 33% further in 2020. Let's have a look to what's happening at the director level. So directors also rarely get less than a majority vote from shareholders, but here again, the nuances matter. Let's do another quick poll. Out of the 2,100 director elections that happened in the TSX Composite Index this year, how many directors do you think received less than 75% support? Was it more than 400, between 200 and 300, or less than 50? Again, you have 10 seconds to fill out your choice. Okay, so actually a vast majority of you are right. The answer is less than 50. So the truth is that only 21 directors received less than 75% of support. The average level of support for all directors, for instance, at Latimer Corporation, the auto parts company, fell below 75%, the lowest level of support for a company in the Composite Index. Further, Latimer Chair and CEO Linda Azenfratz receives the lowest level of support for any directors at a Composite Index company. Why? Because the company has been fairly criticized for poor governance generally. So what we're seeing here is that shareholders are using the vote to express dissatisfaction with the insularity of that family-controlled corporate board. And in Linda's case, also this is a rejection of the combined chair-CEO role. We often see votes like this at family-controlled and entrenched board. Now, a lot of the more interesting actions this year was in shareholder proposals. On average, there are around 70 or 80 proposals filed every year in Canada, and this year there were 79 proposals filed at 29 companies. So 2/3 of them addressed governance issues, and the rest were split relatively evenly between environmental and social issues. And only 39 of those proposals actually went to a vote. The remainder were withdrawn or omitted. So actually, usually this is a very good sign because it means that the shareholder and the company were able to reach agreement on the subject of the proposal, so a vote was not necessarily. However, that means that whenever a shareholder proposal is actually on the ballot, it's critically important that we vote on the issue one way or the other. It's clearly a contentious point, and shareholder sentiment could help tip the scales. The average level of support of shareholder proposals was 13.54% in 2020 and 13.05% in 2019. This may sound like low numbers overall, but you know, they can sometimes obscure good reasons for lower votes, such as at companies where a significant portion of the shares are controlled. But more importantly, when you break down the result by the subject matter of the proposal, you see other patterns emerging. So the most common topic for shareholder proposals in the past year have been climate change, board diversity, human rights and workplace issues, and the incorporation of ESG in executive compensation. But in fact, climate change had the highest level of support from shareholders of any proposal issue, earning close to 3 times the average level of support for proposals generally. 2 proposals asking companies to take actions on climate change with won majority support, including a shareholder proposal at the oil company Ovintiv, which was filed by the United Church of Canada Pension Plan with shared support, which won 56.41% of the vote, and another proposal filed by Rohan at Industrial Alliance Financial, which won 73.53% of the vote. Now, when we're talking about diversity, equity, and workplace issues, these themes are also common shareholder proposals. So a request for a report on protection for decent work at Restaurant Brands International, which is the owner of Tim Hortons and Burger King, was filed and supported by almost 90% of minority shareholders, which roughly represent 37% of the overall vote. This resolution was filed by the Atkinson Foundation, again with shared support. So speaking as someone that leads shareholder engagement on protecting basic workers' rights, that vote also helps to highlight the importance of the shareholder vote. Because prior to that meeting, you have to know that the company was reluctant to take any steps to respond to shares engagement on decent work concerns. And after the vote, the company has opened up, and we are now negotiating new steps with the company to address very clear shareholder revolt on the treatment of workers at Tim Hortons and Burger King. So without the strong vote result, I don't really know if we would make the same level of progress we're making now. So briefly to conclude, I just want to say that that interplay between strong shareholder voting and shareholder engagement is exactly why Share's new partnership with GIR is so important to us, because with your help, we will increase the vote for positive environmental, social, and governance changes, and then Share, as well as other actors, can use those results to support effective shareholder engagement to close the deal. So thank you everyone for taking the time to join us today. I'll pass the microphone back to the moderator for the next speaker. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Next speaker is Lisa Lindsay from Majority Action.
Thank you. Next slide, please. I'm pleased to talk today about the report that Majority Action published on September 21st. where we analyzed the votes of the top 12 global asset managers. And we analyzed them on 2 dimensions. Next slide, please. We looked at how each manager voted on critical climate-related shareholder resolutions at S&P 500 companies in 2020. And I'll tell you a little bit about our methodology. You can download the report at the link that was on the first slide. For these resolutions, only those that received at least 20% were included to ensure that the asset managers' voting records were judged against resolutions that had a baseline of shareholder support. And the resolutions included any resolutions in a S&P 500 company that directly related to climate risk, greenhouse gas targets, scenario planning for climate change, climate transition planning. We didn't include general sustainability issues. We also included 2 additional sets of proposals for the 56 large oil and gas, electric utility, financial services, and automotive manufacturing companies, because those industries are so climate critical. And we believe that poor corporate governance is really at the heart of the failure of these companies to manage climate outcomes in a way that limits warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius. So we also included election spending and lobbying disclosure, and proposals to improve governance at those companies. We included key governance and public policy influence resolutions at all of these companies, including the ones that we identified as key votes in the 2020 season, and the ones that Climate Action 100 identified as key votes. Next slide, please. And you'll see that BlackRock, Vanguard, and Fidelity, they scored very poorly on either the larger shareholder universe that we identified or the Climate Action 100 universe, in spite of the fact that BlackRock is a member of Climate Action 100 plus. So let's do the poll question about whether or not asset owners have had conversations with their asset managers regarding the proxy voting of those institutions. Okay. That's great. It's great that there are 12 of you who have done that. That's excellent. And so this report is designed to be something you can, email to your asset manager or take into a meeting with your asset manager and have a conversation with them about it. Next slide, please. The other metric that we used to evaluate asset manager voting behavior was the extent to which the asset manager supported management recommendations for director votes and executive compensation at companies in the oil and gas, electric utility, financial services, and automotive manufacturing companies. And as you can see, again, with the exception of legal in general, the asset managers widely supported management. And I have a slide like this for every single of those industries, and they don't look very different. So I didn't include them all. So let's do the second poll about whether or not people have ever voted against a director based on the failure of the company to manage climate outcomes. Okay, very interesting. Next slide, please. So as a result of our report, just a week ago, 5 US senators sent a letter to BlackRock kind of demanding that they provide an explanation for their poor track record in voting their proxies and their role in enabling accelerating climate change, which is a systemic risk. And just last night on CNBC's Squawk Box, Larry Fink was doing an interview about BlackRock's quarterly results, and he was asked to explain why BlackRock had performed so poorly. And you can look that up. It's also on the Majority Action Twitter feed. Next slide, please. So where Majority Action is going, and where we think that the responsible shareholder and indeed the entire sector needs to go, is to really focus less on disclosure-based shareholder proposals that are generally non-binding, and to move to really holding board members accountable by casting votes against board members at companies that are not addressing negative climate outcomes. And when I say outcomes, I mean not just the risk that, that the behavior of Exxon is going to damage the future value of Exxon's equities, but that the behavior of Exxon is going to contribute to accelerating climate change that will endanger the assets in the entire portfolio, real estate, fixed income, everything, and that those are the outcomes that need to be managed. And if they haven't gotten the memo at this point, then they really need to go. And that asset owners need to start voting against them. Some already are, and some asset managers are, but there needs to be more participation in telling companies that that board members need to be replaced if they're failing to manage climate outcomes. And I'd be happy to talk more about that in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is my co-CEO, Thomas Estines. Thomas, you have the floor.
Thank you, Étienne. So we'll have a wrap up of what's coming in the regulatory field. Of course, there is a lot more than what we present here, but we have to make a selection. So first, we'll start with in the US at the SEC. So it was long announced, and there was a lot of debate about it, but finally it has been approved in September. So all the rules regulating the shareholder proposal. So it's pretty well summed up in the table. So this change will happen for all the meetings starting January 1st, 2022. So basically, as you can see, to submit a shareholder proposal for the first time, a shareholder must hold shares with the value of around $2,000 for 1 year. Now the SEC is proposing different steps. So as you can see, 2,000 for 3 years, 15,000 for 2 years, and 25,000 for 1 year. So definitely raising the barrier for shareholders here. The objective announced was to cut or reduce the costs for issuers, but if you read between the lines, it's definitely to lower the voice of certain shareholders. The rules to resubmit a proposal is also changing. So here are the thresholds to resubmit a proposal. So going from 3, 6, and 10%, depending on how many times the proposal is being submitted. And so the thresholds are raised to 5, 15, and 25%. So even though we can see results that are close to 20, 30%, this is still very high. especially in Canada. Then the other points, the aggregation of holdings. So it's the possibility for shareholders to team up in order to reach these thresholds. For that, I mean the amount of dollars. And now it's from January 2022, it will be prohibited. And the notion of one proposal, it's actually refers to shareholders appointing other people to represent themselves. So the SEC wanted to change this. So now it's only one person that can present a shareholder proposal, and you cannot appoint someone else to do it for you. So this is less clear why they want to do it, but probably they want to cut the certain link, or they want to avoid some shareholders talking to others. Another rule that can affect place of proxy voting advisors. So the corporations has made pretty much some efforts or lobbying efforts to lower the influence of some proxy voting advisors, which made the SEC design new rules. So now proxy advisor must disclose any conflict of interest that they can have with issuers. So if they have a consulting agreement, any kind of financial connection, they have to disclose it. And also proxy advisors must send their reports to issuers prior to, of course, the meeting, the annual meeting, because issuers can now have a reply or correct. I mean, they can force the proxy advisors to correct the report if they seem, or if they interpret there is an element that is incorrect. So it puts more burden on, of course, proxy advisors, because during proxy season the timelines are very short. But it also actually put a higher burden on issuers, because it gives them actually more work. So all these changes will be implemented starting for the meeting starting not next December, December 2021. Another, I wouldn't say evolution, a new change that is coming from the US is the Department of Labor that grew worried about some ESG funds. So their concern is that if fiduciaries of retirement plans or register plans would select ESG funds, ESG funds being defined as is very large. So even if the fund is only focusing on one environmental aspect or criteria, it would be qualified as an ESG fund. So they're worried that selecting ESG funds would abandon some return along the way, and it would not be in favor of the beneficiaries. So of course, this is contrary to what we've seen. The pandemic showed that ESG fund actually outperformed the market on many aspects. This rule is not final. The comment period ended at the end of July. The Department of Labor didn't commit to a date, but we know that they received a lot of comments. So probably the rule will not be as tough as it appeared. And finally, in Ontario, as some of you may know, the Ontario Securities Commission went into an update of their regulatory framework, which it hasn't done since 2003. So of course, a lot of events have come along the way. So Share led the way with teaming a group of many pension pension plans and also asset managers to comment on the draft recommendations that went out in July. So a lot of subjects were concerned: innovation, competition, proxy voting, of course, mergers and acquisition. What we will recall is the introduction, well, supposedly introduction of diversity targets that issuers must adopt. Also, the disclosure of ESG indicators based on the TCFD and SASB frameworks, and also the introduction of an annual say-on-pay, so advisory vote on executive compensation. Two other points actually caught our attention, and we were more worried about these, and they seem inspired by what happened in the US. So it's the introduction of what we call right of rebuttal, so the possibility for issuers to contest the proxy reports and the possibility to have them corrected, and also the notion of no action letter. So this is a mechanism that allows boards to ignore some shareholder proposal based on different motives. So either if the proposal is deemed too prescriptive or too costly for the corporation, then they can avoid it and omit it, so not included in the process. So the final report should be published by the end of this year. So of course it's a wrap up. There is a lot more. I can put in the chat a link. It's actually an article with all what's on the short-term agenda for the SEC. We don't have, unfortunately, the equivalent in Canada, but it affects a lot more corporations. So that's it for my regulatory update.
Thank you, Thomas. The last speaker, but not the least, the former CEO of Groupe Investissement Responsable, Olivier Gamache.
Hi, everybody. I think I'm the least important of speaker. I just want to say hi. Thank you for joining us. After 15 years at the helm of a GR, I'm proud to be passing the torch on to Thomas and Étienne. I think I leave all of our clients, and I want to extend also the warmest of welcome to our new clients that we acquire with the share partnership. I think I'll leave you all in competent hands. I've been through every phase of that responsible market. I think I've been to it since the ethical investment era, through the social investment era, the ESG, and now the impact and the sustainable finance news cycle. So as GR reinvents itself again for what is GR 2.0, following what the market is doing, kind of constantly evolving, I think I'm really proud of what we've accomplished, not only as a company, but as a community. I see a lot of familiar names in the participant. I just want to say it's been a pleasure for me to be part of this adventure. In the French webinar, I quoted one of the often misquoted quote from Gandhi, which was actually from a union leader, saying first they ridicule us, now they're laughing at us, or now we will be fighting. I think with the regulatory changes that are being discussed, we're now at a fighting phase. I was there to be laughed at, marginalized with a lot of you, but we will still be there for the fighting. I'll be here overseeing this transition at the next step at a board level, but always close by, because that community and that company will always be close, not only to my art, but the fact that I live upstairs make it so that I'll always be close by. So I wish good luck. I say a warm welcome to a new client. And for those who are not clients yet, I'm pretty sure that Étienne and Thomas are kind of waiting for your call, or pretty sure they're going to follow up shortly. So thank you for attending that webinar today.
Thank you, Olivier. We're now at the Q&A section of the webinar. we did receive one question from Andrea Moffet. The question is for Sarah Couturier-Tano. Are the ratio the same in the US? I'm pretty sure Andrea Moffat is talking about the 1.4 shareholder proposal and the vast majority of manager proposal in the General Assembly.
Oh, I thought she would be talking about the ratio between governance proposal and environmental and social proposal. But in both cases, anyway, the statistics are very similar. So the ratio of governance proposals to environmental and social proposals is very similar. But that being said, there are some matters that we see more often in ballots in the US, such as a large number of resolutions related to political spending and lobbying, which is very critical in the US system, where there are pure rules around campaign financing. So this is very specific to the US. But also there has been a surge in human capital management related proposal in the US this year, especially on workers, health and safety, inclusiveness, diversity, inequity, but also board oversight. So to give you an idea, last year, 40 proposals were filed on these topics against 55 proposals this year. And I'm speculating that this may be attributed to the current health crisis related to the COVID-19 pandemic.
Thank you, Sarah. We do have another question from James McRitchie. How frequently do funds in Canada have to report their proxy votes? Do they do in code like in the US that few can read? I'm not sure who can answer that question. Do we have any data? I'm thinking about Rosalie. Do you have an answer for that?
Sure. So the legislation actually forces mutual funds and investment funds to adopt a proxy voting policy, publish it. They do not force to vote, but they forced mutual funds and investment funds to disclose at least once a year what they did they cast a ballot or not, and if they did, what was their vote. So that is mandatory according to Rule 81-107, but it is not often easy to find the information. You kind of have to dig and go through the website of mutual funds manufacturer. My advice, if you want to look at the funds, your own funds, the funds that you own, you do a Google search with proxy voting, and normally something pops up. Now, if the person's inquiring for institutional money, not individual money, so mutual funds and the likes talks more about the retail market. So for the retail market, it's regulated. For the institutional market, it's not regulated. You do have to ask. If you have money that's managed by a portfolio manager, you kind of have to ask. And people don't know this, but oftentimes there is an option to make sure that these invitations to participate to AGMs, these what we call proxy ballot, these things can actually be directed at you or to an intermediary of your choice. That is a decision that belongs to you. Oftentimes it is not discussed in the financial advisor's office, the broker's office, or with your portfolio manager. It is not viewed by many as being important, and so I do think that the power of asking question, that's what I would recommend.
There's a follow-up question for you, Rosalie. Is there any movement to get those proxy votes announced and close to real time in a user-friendly format? Is there anybody out there fighting for that? Do you know any group, maybe in the US or in Canada?
It's a good question. I'm not aware of things. I know that some leaders are publishing, I'd say, more frequently. So if you look at Caisse de dépôt et placement, they are publishing at, I think, 5 days after on their website. So they wouldn't publish ahead, but they would publish not far after. There's probably other market leaders who are disclosing this information, but I don't know of any movement. Maybe another panelist would know.
Do we have another panelist that know any group that are fighting for that issue?
I can answer. You know, it's difficult to leave me muted long. We have a few of GR clients who actually publish on a continuous basis on their website using our tools, our platform, that they can basically decide how many days after or even prior they would want to publish their voting decision. But for most of them, they just want to make sure that they respect the legislation, and that for them we publish once a year. But we do have the capability to do it, and we do it for some of our clients.
And I can just add, Étienne, from the share side, certainly as part of our policy advocacy work, we are asking for improvements in the accessibility of proxy voting data as part of that. So when we're reaching out to regulators, that is something that's certainly on the list for us. And seeking the data to be open to the public, certainly in a format that is machine readable for analysis is part of that.
Thank you, Shannon. We do have another question from Andrea Moffat. Has there been an analysis of proxy voting on climate and board done with a focus on Canadian asset management? We did collect some data. Sarah did analyze it. Do you have any more information on specific climate and board, Sarah?
I actually don't. I really don't know. Maybe, I don't know if Kevin or Shannon, you have some insight.
In terms of the analysis, we haven't done an analysis on that in a public space, but we do support some of our clients in something that we call proxy audit, which is an ability to look at the way your managers are voting on priority votes. And if you have multiple managers, looking at how they're comparing on votes, particularly if they're voting on the same issues at the same company, are they voting in the same way? And this is a really critical tool to help asset owners actually understand how those proxy rights are being used. And it's a way for you to look specifically at issues that matter to you, like climate.
I would add, we did do at Share a study a couple of years ago on some of the biggest asset managers and some of the biggest pension plans in Canada on how they voted on climate related resolutions. This was done for the the Commonwealth Climate Law Initiative, but that's a couple of years old. So an update to that would be fascinating. Maybe we should be speaking to Lisa for their methodology there and see what we can do. Thanks.
Thank you, Kevin. We do have a last question from Mark Sylvester. What information is available on proxy votes relating to Indigenous people issues or rights? I'm pretty sure we do have a lot of people from Share who want to answer that question. Maybe Shannon or Sarah. Is there any information available on proxy voting on Indigenous issues?
I would answer, Mark, in a much similar way as the climate question, in the sense that I don't think we've done an analysis, but perhaps this is something that we could consider of asset managers' votes across the board on Indigenous rights issues that have come up on the ballot. But certainly that's something that we can do as part of that proxy audit, and perhaps as part of our work on the Reconciliation Responsible Investment Initiative, which has an asset manager accountability piece to it. And a big part of that is looking at the proxy voting.
Thank you, Shannon. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Thank you, Shannon. Thank you, Rosalie. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Kevin, Olivier, and Thomas. I really appreciate your time, your effort, your participation today. Thank you to everybody who joined us today. And that's the end of the webinar. Have a nice day, everyone. And I hope we will be able to do another webinar soon. On other topic, I did wrote climate change, Indigenous rights. Those are really, really interesting topics that we could probably explore on a Canadian basis. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Étienne.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone. Ciao.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.